streets of Melrose Park to the trading floor of the Merc. He's fought for every dollar he's ever earned. And now, with personal liberty and our system of capitalism under assault in America, he's here to seize back our rights from the government. With a cigar in one hand and a copy of the Declaration of Independence in the other, he's Sean Thompson. And this is the Sean Thompson Show.
Some folks are born made to wave the flag. Ooh, they're red, white, and blue.
Money, 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 money.
And when the band plays, hey,
when you realize it's the Democrat multi-layer corruption and taxation that chases away businesses, takes 50, 60% of the honest people's money, you start to get humdrum about the economy. But outside these Democrat enclaves, well, you wouldn't know it. The American economy is a boomtown.
Well, there you go. More new highs indicated. Join us now, Ed Yardeni, president of Yardeni Research. He came swaggering in here like he knows everything. You've been...
No, I don't.
You've been right, though.
Thank you.
You are welcome. Last time you were on, you went from, I think you went from
7,700 to 8,250.
To what?
8,250.
By
the end of the year, and 10,000 by the end of the decade.
Tom Lee recently has said best couple of years that we're going to see in the stock market in his lifetime, or something similar to that. You've got some non-obvious reasons to make that case, don't you?
Well, I think it's actually the obvious reason, and that
earnings?
It's earnings. Yeah, I've been recently talking about FOMO versus FEMO. FEMO's fabulous earnings momentum, and that's really what's been driving the market, not FOMO, not fear of missing out.
So
it's a boomtown. And when you talk about oil, really? Did you or did you not buy your $80 puts the way I told you, Squirrel? Because if you did, you'd really be walking in tall cotton. My next guest knows this all too well. When it comes to the real economy, America is the youngest and the richest country because we embrace capitalism. So does my next guest, who's quite debonair. In fact, all last week I had to hear how handsome he was. He did look fantastic. The lapel was also on the vest. E.J. Antoni of the Heritage Foundation. What's up, sexy?
Sean, it was so good to see you in person. I got to say, it was such a great time. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Anytime, open invitation, and everybody loved you. And, it's fascinating because we were able to have a really nice conversation about the problems that face us. And those problems are really concentrated in the areas that suck at life, known as the Democrat areas. And when you talk about this stealing of welfare benefits, I got a cut on the board about Nick Shirley, and they were in Minnesota. Company's been there since 1999. 30 years they've been robbing us. All a scam. But we've known this about the welfare system. It was set up to be stolen. How else could you explain the trillions? It's not billions. What people don't realize, a billion is 1,000 million. We're talking billions, billions, billions over 30 years. It's trillions that have been stolen from us in the name of welfare, isn't it?
Right. So first of all, I think you can make the argument, Sean, that literally all of the welfare state is basically stolen from us. But even if you want to just look at what would very, very strictly be considered fraud, not people abusing the system, but just outright fraud, what you can go to jail for, that adds up over time. You may say, all right, well, this year it wasn't that bad. Guys, this has been going on for 60 years? The system has been in place, and ever since it was put in place, it has been getting abused. So yes, it amounts to trillions of dollars. You're talking about just individual programs where the government has already identified, missing payments of literally billions of dollars per year. And that's one program. And now you have hundreds of programs on top of that.
What else is fascinating is that it's within the creation that the plot was laid. If you really wanted to provide anything, from health care to food to housing, whatever the case is, you would always incentivize the provider, not cut him in so that he could then pretend it's revenue. Therein is the problem. It was created from the get-go to be stolen, which is why in 2010, when they revealed that $100 billion a year was being stolen through Medicare, it just became operating expenses. So when you look at the failure that is Obamacare, it's working exactly as designed. This is the goal, to disincentivize private ownership of everything, and I don't just mean buildings in New York.
Right, 100%. Obamacare was essentially designed to reduce the profitability of private sector healthcare, and that's exactly what has happened. It has therefore reduced the number of companies, not increased them. It has reduced competition, not increased it. It has not made your costs lower by virtue of more competition, which is what they told us would happen. Instead, less competition meant higher prices. And because the government constantly subsidizes the wrong thing, instead of subsidizing supply to get more supply, they subsidize demand. Getting more demand, what happens when you have more demand? Prices go up. This is why it was absolutely the right thing to end those Obamacare plus-ups, or the additional subsidies that dated all the way back to COVID, because every time you increase those subsidies, what has happened over time? You get a one-to-one, that's not an exaggeration, a one-to-one increase in terms of what the providers are charging. So it doesn't actually save people any money. All it does is cost the taxpayer. It is not a handout to the poor. It is a handout to the lobbyists and to the insurance industries, essentially, within the healthcare community.
One of the fascinating things to live through, to watch, was the momentum that was started after Barack Obama promised this utopian nonsense. Everybody knew what it was when they unveiled the one law that turned into the destruction and backdoor nationalization of our health care. Everybody knew what it was, and it started a big movement. It's amazing to watch the politicians today refuse to attack that very issue. And it's also amazing to see the morons on the other side pretend that they have a point to win elections with. You remember Tim Kaine. He's the lawyer, senator, who graduated cum laude from law school, who was shocked to learn that our rights come from God, not government. He wanted to let us know this is how it's always going to be.
Part of the healthcare safety net in this country is free clinics. Free clinics provide medical services through physicians and other allied health professionals to all comers. And
Now, you and I know, Cubans know, Venezuelans know, the Soviets know, there is no such thing as free. And if it has the image, the veneer of free, it really does suck. So when you hear Tim Kaine run on this, shouldn't anybody who even thinks about running against him inform the people that when you get free health care, you live not only in a third world, but the health care itself sucks?
Yeah, let's show the people examples of what free health care looks like. Free health care in places like Cuba looks like just literally not getting care. You die for want of care, not an exaggeration. Ask yourself, are Floridians literally trying to swim from southern Florida to Cuba on rafts and pieces of driftwood and literal garbage? Are they trying to make that journey so that they can get their free health care in Cuba? Or stick with me here, Sean, are the Cubans the one who are trying to escape their failed communist regime in order to get life-saving care in southern Florida, which for the rest of us is just basically routine maintenance? But when you can't even get that in your failed socialist state, it is life-saving care. Again, things for us that we consider relatively ordinary because we're so blessed to live in America, things like blood pressure medicine that literally keep people alive, but we don't actually think that much about. Those are the kinds of things that you can't get in Cuba. And if you think Cuba is too extreme of an example, fine. Look at America's hat, what we call Canada. In Canada, you literally have to wait months to get something as simple as an X-ray or a CT scan. You know, I can go to urgent care, or I can get a referral from my doc and go over to get that imaging literally within 24 hours, sometimes even sooner if it's considered an emergency. But in Canada, even if it is an emergency, you can still end up on a waiting list, and a lot of people die on the waiting list. That is why, once again, do you have Americans going to Canada to get care, or do you have Canadians coming across the border to America to pay cash to get care? That's what happens, because oftentimes they can't afford to wait. So at the end of the day, here's the moral of the story, Sean. You always pay for everything. Maybe you pay for it in terms of cash. Maybe you pay for it in terms of higher healthcare premiums. Maybe you pay for it in terms of lower quality care or sometimes no care, and then you can pay with your life.
And the reality is, too, the reason that once the malaise of living low sets in, then the totalitarian has you exactly where he wants you. And those examples, by the way, completely accurate. And I prefer Canada as our sissy cousin, but we'll go with hat. And one of the things you realize is it's the same in these Democrat enclaves. These Democrat enclaves, and I'm living this in real time. I have a relative that goes back and forth to the doctor, and to do it in Illinois versus showing them down here the difference. It's fascinating to see the difference in the quality of health care in the areas that reject Obamacare. And this is something that I think needs to be focused on. But these politicians have to start understanding. More people want to hear the truth, the diagnosis, and then be reminded of just how incredible it is to live outside these Democrat enclaves, which have layered on taxes, expenses, costs. They found a way to turn you into that serf where no matter what you make, between the federal taxes, the local taxes, the state taxes, and the increase on essential items from energy to licensing, it's far less of an American experience to live where American success is disincentivized in Democrat areas, isn't it?
Sean, absolutely. And this is where, when we talk about the cost of living crisis, which, look, is very real. Don't get me wrong. You know, Biden reduced the value of the dollar by over 20% in just 4 years. That's an astonishing erosion, and that hit everybody, regardless of where you live in America. But if you look at where is the cost of living crisis worst today, it is in these blue states that overtax, that overregulate, that artificially increase the cost of doing business and therefore the cost of living. Those are the places where housing is the least affordable. Yeah, I'm shocked at how I live just outside of D.C. and I pay literally twice in my rent for a little 2-bedroom place as a very good friend of mine who lives in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. He pays less than half of what I pay on his mortgage, and he has a very large 4-bedroom home. So that just goes to show you, again, the stark difference here. It's not as if, well, you're close to a city, therefore it has to be more expensive. No, look at Houston. Houston is one of the most price-elastic housing markets in the country. It's not because it's small. It's not because it's rural. It has sprawling suburbs as far as the eye can see. It's because they don't have all the crazy zoning restrictions. It's because they don't tax their people and their businesses into oblivion. That has helped keep the cost of living low. It has nothing to do with things like population density or overall size. That's a myth.
So one of the, we're on Rumble and YouTube and Facebook, and we have active chats in there. And one of the chats last week was talking about the economy. I think it was after our smoker. And a wonderful man, he's like, listen, don't forget where your fans, they live in this area. And he thinks I forget them. I never forget them. The point of the conversation is I experience this in real time. I have right now interest in both places. And to realize when Joe Biden was pretending he was going to give Comcast away for free to the people who are on food stamps, who wear Gucci belts that you and I are never going to wear. However, well, you might wear it. I ain't going to wear it. However, when you realize, the cable in Elmwood Park, where I'm from, where I had a house, the cable is in excess of $300 for cable and their internet and their high-speed internet, the wireless. The same thing. And by the way, much better quality of life living. It's a third. It's 1/3. The cell phones, something as stupid as cell phones, less than half. And you look at these Democrat areas and you look at what they've done. They have done something, the philosophy, people who support the philosophy of taking from the other to pay yours, don't have the courage to do. They managed to steal from the people who are not on welfare. And they did it through this idea. We're going to give the power to just tax in the name of cable, in the name of cell phones, in the name of things that other people pay a third for, pay half of. And that's the snap part where you can't afford socialism if you're poor. You shouldn't afford it if you're rich because it erodes all the equity in the money you earn. Ultimately, you have these experiments going on. If someone today is voting Democrat, it is one reason and one reason only. They themselves benefit immensely from stealing the quality of life from their neighbor. It's the old socialist communist argument against America once again, isn't it?
Sean, I think that's very, very well said. Absolutely. And the problem is they are now offering in a lot of these blue states and blue cities, they are offering people so much in terms of welfare that sometimes people think they have no choice. They lose this vision of themselves as an independent and as a self-reliant individual, and they lose pride in their work. And you do this by, look at D.C., again, where I am now. You can, as a family of four with no one working, you can get, in terms of all your welfare added together, the equivalent of $120,000 in terms of annual income. In other words, that family, again, family of four with nobody working.
Here we are working. What
Right.
the hell are we doing? Like morons. You're nuts.
Sean, you would,
my lifestyle is very expensive. I got to work my ass off.
Right, exactly, Sean, but look, that's the calculus a lot of these people are doing too. They're looking at their situation and they're saying they're effectively saying that they're in a welfare trap. They would never articulate it that way, but they're looking at their situation and saying, if I do decide to go to work, I start losing all these benefits, and I have to work to the point where I earn over $120,000 a year before I break even, and you've only broken even again in terms of the income. But you've actually lost in terms of you are now working, let's say 40 hours a week, so 2,000 hours a year or so. That's how much you're working that you previously didn't have to work, that you could have spent in leisure. So it's still a losing equation if you want to think of it that way. It is very much a welfare trap, and it is incredibly costly for the societies that try to support it, which again goes back to what we were talking about with why life is so much more expensive for those of us who work in any of these blue cities and blue states.
So the evidence is irrefutable. I mean, really, it truly, you're not arguing. I'm not arguing. You're arguing reality. Nobody's arguing with you, you fracking idiots. We could show you the paperwork. You don't even give a rip. So now it's time to really have that moment that I think needs to happen. And the answer of if you want to give a program away, it's always just incentivize the provider of everything. I don't care what it is. But they're not going to do that because there's more power and money in the political scam of pretending you can middle it. So now it's time for the people who do provide these services, who do and have answered the calling of see a need, fill a need, do very well. Jeff Bezos and his articulating finally the principles of the beauty of him being successful versus the government and all of the attributes to Amazon. I really do think it's time for these capitalists to pull out of these Democrat areas, from Amazon to CVS to Walgreens, to everybody who has allowed these suck-ons to imitate a standard of a citizen of decency. Because when you look at these they're called teen takeovers in Chicago. Well, if you're in Chicago, you just hear about Chicago. You don't hear that it went on across the country in all the Democrat areas. And you look at just the insurance companies and the financial beating they took this weekend, as you pretend this is just normal behavior or whatever. We don't call it a teen takeover. Call it what it is. You cannot afford to be decent when surrounded by savage indecent. You can't do it. Don't you think these insurance companies, these providers of convenience of capitalism need to say, wait, where are you calling me from? Yeah, we don't offer our services there. I really feel until you do that, they're going to continue to have the power to steal elections.
Oh, Sean, we're seeing that in a lot of markets. I can't tell you how many insurance providers have just flat out, they have pulled out of so many urban areas because of exactly what you're talking about. They basically can't charge a premium high enough that's going to allow them to get enough liquidity to then be able to pay out all of the claims that they're anticipating in those areas because of the absolute lawlessness. I mean, when you have a state like California and you pass a law and you say you have to steal more than, $500 before you can actually get arrested or prosecuted or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
So in other words, just walk into the Walgreens, take as much of whatever product as you want, as long as it's under $500, and nobody's going to stop you. And then they wonder why Walgreens has everything locked up, and then they wonder why Walgreens still loses money and leaves, like you're saying, Sean, and then they get mad about it. And they talk about corporate abandonment and all this other, leftist nonsense, weaselly words. The fact is, these mayors and these governors have allowed crime to run absolutely rampant, and teenage crime has gotten particularly bad. And you get these teen mobs is what they are. They're not teen takeovers, they're mobs. And when they destroy businesses, when they destroy property, when they violate other people's property rights and are not held accountable, you can expect more of it. And that is a clear sign to market participants, both buyers and sellers, to get the heck out of that market because their property rights are not going to be respected.
Well, due to political correctness, which is the scepter of all tyrannies, we've learned to adjust here on AM 560, The Answer in Chicago. We don't call them what they are, savagery, wildings, takeovers. What we call them now is a ghetto pageant. I mean, after all, the Chicagoans are paying $33,000 a year to pretend that those savage beasts who are destroying the quality of life are students at the Chicago Public Schools. So that's a pageant of ghetto lifestyle. Wasn't it beautiful? And until you start to recognize that's normal in these Democrat areas, and these people, if you have a financial advisor that didn't tell you to sell Walgreens stock in these Democrat area or in any area, when you saw that the Democrats were going to allow them to destroy the profitability of Walgreens, your financial advisor is a scumbag too, because that's the first thing they should have done. When they tell you what they're going to do, at least recognize it. And when it comes to corporate abandonment from that illiterate moron in Chicago who says he's going to sue, realize that's going to become a law. So if you want to get out of here, well, it's free. Now's the time to realize these Democrats think that's an actual law, and you're obligated to give them services where they tell you they're going to steal from you.
Right. And Sean, again, this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where the cost of living crisis is really a blue state problem and a blue city problem today. If you look at places like, look at Miami and look at Tampa in Florida, look at the DFW area in Texas or Phoenix in Arizona, and then compare that to places like San Francisco, Chicago, New York, the places where they have actually been free to build new housing units. Those are the places, the first three states, where you're actually seeing home prices come down and homes become more affordable. But those last three states that I mentioned, those cities, those are the places where home prices are still going up, in large part because what's happening now is the dynamic of insurance catching up. Because the cost to repair and rebuild has gotten so astronomically expensive and continues to go up, homeowners' insurance costs continue to go up. And look at what's happened. If you look at prices, if you look at interest rates, they are no longer the primary drivers of increases in terms of the cost of home ownership. It is now property taxes and it is insurance costs. And sure enough, those two are worst in blue states, not red states.
So, you know, it's funny, obviously in the real estate business and where I live is South Florida, right? And for a couple of years, it was rough with the insurance and the increases. And do you know why it was rough? Jeb Bush, that fracking imbecile. Another problem traces back to the CIA Bush family. Jeb Bush had limited the ability for insurance companies to come here. So in the middle of COVID, DeSantis, after Ian, after all the hurricanes and the HOA incompetent morons that destroyed their HOAs, he said, you know what, we're going to remove this Jeb Bush thing. About a year ago, give or take, my insurance went down 30%. 30%, which is huge. It's back to where it was when I bought. So to see how people who understand the cost of Marxism, of communism, of a Bush Republican, when they remove those provisions and they open up the market, all of a sudden it does what it's done since the beginning of time. Everything gets better. So I love the idea that we're talking about this. And I drove yesterday. EJ, I did the heart like we were 18 on our way to the spring break, right through. But the minute you go out of Illinois and jump in, I took the south road, so I jumped into Kentucky, then Alabama. You see the cost of everything go down. But you know what else you see? You see the excitement of being alive in American states that succeed. The people are happier, the faces are shinier, and the businesses are opening up. So we're going to overcome this, even if you feel like you're not, because at least you have federalism, and states don't have to be Democrat mafia run if they don't want to be.
Amen, Sean. States are laboratories of democracy. The ones who make the right decisions will succeed, and the ones who make the wrong decisions, they're going to continue to lag behind, and people ultimately are going to vote with their feet.
Yeah, and the beauty of when I buy you that steak dinner I owe you down here, it's going to be served and cooked and prepared from somebody who is not a Democrat, so you know the product is going to be better in the first place. EJ Antoni, you sexy devil, thank you for last week, but more importantly for every week you join us. I appreciate you.
It is, as always, my pleasure.